The Atlantic, April 1942. The night air was thick with the smell of salt and aviation fuel as Lieutenant Commander James "Jim" Reedy, a wiry and perpetually grim-faced 27-year-old pilot, steered his PBY Catalina flying boat through the moonless blackness above the Bay of Biscay. His crew, the seasoned members of VPB 73 Squadron, were on an anti-submarine patrol, a nightly ritual that had become a disheartening exercise in futility. Below them, a seemingly endless expanse of dark water concealed the most ruthless predator of the war, the German U-boat. For 4 agonizing months, these underwater wolves had been tearing through Allied shipping with impunity. Over 500 Allied vessels, laden with vital supplies, had vanished beneath the waves in the opening act of what the Germans chillingly called the Second Happy Time. The cries of men drowning in icy waters, the silent sinking of supply convoys. These were the daily tolls that haunted Reedy's thoughts and hardened his resolve. Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, 35, the aerial photographer on Reedy's crew, peered through his camera port, his breath misting on the glass. He knew the limitations of their equipment all too well. By day, a U-boat could be spotted from altitude, a dark smudge against the lighter ocean surface. But then came the agonizing chase, the frantic dive, and the enemy was gone, swallowed by the depths. At night, detection was almost impossible. Their current reconnaissance photography relied on daylight or flares that illuminated too wide an area for too short a time, often revealing the aircraft before the submarine. The German U-boats, with their powerful diesel engines, could surface under the cover of darkness, recharge their batteries, and then vanish in under 30 seconds at the first hint of an Allied aircraft. It was a maddening game of hide-and-seek, and the Allies were consistently losing. Thousands of feet below Reedy's Catalina, Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann, 31, commander of U-552, felt a surge of satisfaction as his crew skillfully brought the boat to the surface. The cool Atlantic air filled his lungs. 8 successful patrols had honed his crew into a precision instrument. He understood the Allies' aerial patrols, respected their persistence, but knew their weaknesses. 30 seconds, gentlemen, Hartmann would often remind his officers. 30 seconds from sighting to submergence. They cannot touch us if we are swift. He was a veteran, confident in the superiority of German naval engineering and the disciplined efficiency of his men. The U-552 was a phantom in these waters, a deadly ghost haunting the convoy lanes, and he intended to keep it that way. The Atlantic was their hunting ground, and for now, it belonged to them. Reedy banked the Catalina gently, the droning of its 2 radial engines a constant, weary companion. He thought of the empty seat at dinner back at base, another convoy ship lost, another group of sailors gone. The grim arithmetic of the Battle of the Atlantic weighed heavily on every man. They were tasked with spotting the unseen, attacking the ephemeral, and they lacked the tools to do it effectively. The gap between spotting a U-boat and actually being able to attack it was a chasm measured in those agonizing 30 seconds. No matter how low they flew, how many flares they dropped, the U-boat slipped away. It was a problem that conventional military technology seemed incapable of solving. Yet, ironically, the breakthrough would not come from a new sonar or a more powerful radar. It would come from a civilian, a mild-mannered professor, whose forbidden photographic technique, violating every rule of aerial reconnaissance, would unexpectedly illuminate the invisible enemy. The solution lay in a camera flash, a technique that military strategists would initially dismiss as reckless and impractical, but one that a scientist's obsession with freezing motion would transform into a weapon. This was the untold story of how one photographer's singular vision would shift the entire balance of the Battle of the Atlantic. E.B. Harold "Doc" Edgerton, an unassuming but brilliant 39-year-old professor at MIT, had spent the better part of a decade defying the limits of human perception. While Allied convoys burned in the Atlantic, Edgerton was in his brightly lit laboratory, perfecting a technology that seemed utterly unrelated to warfare: strobe photography. Since the late 1930s, his work had been a relentless pursuit of the fleeting, the invisible movements that occurred too fast for the naked eye or conventional cameras to capture. He had invented the electronic flash, a device capable of emitting bursts of light so brief and intense that it could freeze any motion no matter how rapid. Edgerton's lab at MIT, a hive of innovation, hummed with the energy of scientific curiosity. He wasn't interested in making war, he was interested in making visible the hidden dynamics of the universe. His photographs were legendary. A single drop of milk, captured mid-splash, forming a perfect coronet of liquid. A hummingbird's wings frozen mid-flutter, each feather distinct. A bullet tearing through an apple. The path of its destruction suspended in time. These weren't just pretty pictures, they were scientific revelations, revealing the mechanics of motion with unprecedented clarity. The technology was built around xenon flash tubes, capable of discharging enormous amounts of energy in durations as short as 100,000 dollars of a second. This ultra-high-speed photography was considered a marvel, but mostly an academic one. Then came Pearl Harbor. The immediate need for scientific innovation transformed American universities into extensions of the war effort. Edgerton, like many civilian scientists, was quickly recruited by the Navy. His initial assignment was to improve conventional aerial reconnaissance cameras, to make them sharper, faster, more reliable. But Edgerton, ever the visionary, saw a different application for his strobe. He proposed something audacious, something seemingly reckless, using intense flash photography not just in daylight, but at night, from aircraft to photograph enemy positions. The idea was met with immediate, almost universal resistance from military strategists. "A flash at night, Doctor," a senior Navy officer had scoffed. "You might as well paint a target on our aircraft. It would instantly reveal our position to any enemy gunner for miles around. It violates every blackout protocol, every tactical principle." The prevailing military doctrine was absolute stealth. Aircraft must be invisible, especially at night. Edgerton's flash was the antithesis of stealth. It was a beacon. Edgerton, however, was not easily deterred. He understood the military's concerns, but he also understood the physics of light and time better than anyone. He calmly explained the technical specifications of his proposed system. A powerful xenon flash, firing for an infinitesimal fraction of a second. So brief it was imperceptible to the human eye from any significant distance. Its primary purpose wasn't to illuminate a vast area, but to capture an instantaneous snapshot. He argued passionately, "Gentlemen, a U-boat captain can crash dive in 30 seconds, but in that 30 seconds, they cannot shoot down a plane simply because it emitted a flash of light, lasting 100,000th of a second. The danger of being seen by the enemy is far outweighed by the opportunity to see them." His logic was persuasive if unconventional. The military remained skeptical, but the dire situation in the Atlantic demanded new ideas, no matter how unorthodox. Edgerton's forbidden technique, once relegated to the realm of scientific curiosity, was about to be given a chance to prove its worth on the battlefields of the Atlantic. By June 1942, the skepticism in the Navy had softened just enough to allow Harold Edgerton a modicum of opportunity. He arrived at Navy Air Station, Quonset Point, Rhode Island, a civilian among men in uniform, carrying his peculiar boxes of wires and flash tubes. It was here he met Lieutenant Commander Jim Reedy and Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan. Reedy, though deeply frustrated by their current methods, eyed Edgerton with a professional pilot's distrust of academic tinkering. Sullivan, a traditional photographer who believed in daylight and proper exposure, openly scoffed at the idea of a flash that could somehow reveal a U-boat at night. "So, Doc," Sullivan drawled, "you're telling me this gizmo is going to take a picture of something that's not even there in the dark, and it's going to do it without getting us shot down?" He gestured vaguely at Edgerton's equipment, a complex array of capacitors, transformers, and the fragile-looking xenon flash tube. "Not quite, Chief," Edgerton replied, his voice calm. "It will capture an image of something that is there, but which we cannot see with our eyes, and yes, without the enemy being able to react." The technical challenge was immense. Edgerton needed to synchronize his ultra-brief flash with an aerial camera mounted on an aircraft traveling at 150 miles per hour, often several hundred feet above the ocean. The timing had to be perfect. The flash powerful enough to penetrate the dark water, and the camera lens capable of capturing the fleeting burst of light. Their first night test flight was set over Narragansett Bay. For secrecy, a friendly submarine, the USS S-44, was dispatched to serve as their elusive target. Reedy, with Egerton aboard, flew the Catalina. Sullivan manned the cameras, grumbling under his breath. As they passed over the designated area, Egerton manually triggered the flash. A blinding, instantaneous burst of light erupted from beneath the plane, momentarily turning the black ocean surface into a stark, ghostly white. The flash was so sudden, so shockingly bright, that even the veteran crew flinched. Then, just as quickly, the darkness returned, leaving only faint after-images in their vision. The initial results were a disheartening failure. The photographs, when developed, were a blur of black and white, marred by camera shake, imprecise timing, and a flash that, while intense, wasn't quite powerful enough to pierce the water effectively. The synchronization at 150 mph proved incredibly difficult. The S-44, even when it was known to be directly below, remained an invisible smudge or worse, entirely absent. Sullivan shook his head. "Told you, Doc. Might be good for milk drops, but submarines ain't milk drops." But Egerton was undeterred. He knew the principles were sound. This was a problem of engineering and calibration. It was at this critical juncture that Ensign Robert Chen, a sharp 24-year-old Chinese-American photo intelligence analyst, was brought in. Chen possessed an almost uncanny ability to discern patterns and anomalies in photographic data. He meticulously analyzed every failed frame, looking for even the slightest hint of a cause. He cross-referenced camera settings, aircraft speed, altitude, and flash timing, building complex charts and graphs. Chen's rigorous analysis led to the breakthrough. He discovered what Egerton would later call the Egerton window, a precise fraction of a second, an optimal timing between the camera shutter and the flash discharge, calibrated for the aircraft's speed and altitude, that maximized the chance of capturing a clear image. He also identified subtle ways to dampen vibration and suggested minor modifications to the camera mounts. With these adjustments, a second test flight was authorized. Reedy, though still doubtful, flew the Catalina once more. Egerton and Chen focused on their instruments. This time, as the flash fired, there was a palpable sense of anticipation. When the film was developed, the images were astounding. There, clear as day, was the outline of the USS S-44, submerged at a depth of 40 feet. It wasn't perfectly sharp, but it was unmistakably a submarine. Yet, what truly captivated Chen and Egerton was not just the submarine itself, but something else entirely, something unexpected, a faint, luminous trail stretching behind the submerged vessel. It was a pattern that seemed to persist underwater, a ghostly signature of the submarine's passage. Ensign Robert Chen, with his meticulous eye and analytical mind, spent countless hours poring over the photographs from the second test flight. The image of the USS S-44 submerged at 40 feet was remarkable enough, but it was the faint, luminous trail behind the submarine that truly fascinated him. It was a ghostly, almost ethereal pattern, visible only in the brief, intense illumination of Egerton's flash. Chen theorized that the submarine, moving through the water, was disturbing something that then emitted light. He consulted with oceanographers and biologists. The answer, when it came, was a revelation. The discovery was of bioluminescent trails. The oceans, especially the temperate and tropical waters of the Atlantic, teemed with microscopic marine organisms, plankton, dinoflagellates, and other forms of life that produced light when disturbed. When a large object like a submarine moved through these waters, it agitated these organisms, causing them to emit a brief faint glow. This glow was usually too weak and too dispersed to be seen by the naked eye from an aircraft, especially at night. But Egerton's ultra-powerful, ultra-fast flash, acting like an instantaneous spotlight, was capturing this phenomenon. It illuminated the bioluminescent wake, revealing a distinctive signature that marked the path of a submerged submarine. This wasn't an entirely new concept. Ancient mariners had occasionally reported seeing fire in the water following their ships or large marine animals at night, phenomena now understood to be bioluminescence. But no one had ever conceived of using it for anti-submarine warfare. Egerton, informed of Chen's discovery, immediately saw the implications. He quickly modified his flash units, experimenting with different light wavelengths and filters to enhance the visibility of these bioluminescent trails, which glowed strongest in the blue-green spectrum. The result of this collaboration was the development of the Egerton Flash Unit, a specialized aircraft-mounted system purpose-built for night submarine detection. The unit consisted of a massive bank of capacitors, a powerful xenon flash tube, and a synchronized aerial camera, all integrated into a streamlined pod that could be attached to the underside of a patrol aircraft. Its specifications were formidable. It could generate up to 5 million candle power, fire for just 100,000th of a second, and had an effective range of 500 feet below the aircraft, allowing it to penetrate significant depths of water. Crucially, its recycling time was reduced to a mere 10 seconds, meaning a pilot could trigger successive flashes to track a moving target. A specialized training program was rapidly instituted for photo reconnaissance crews. They learned not just how to operate the new equipment, but how to interpret the faint, ephemeral patterns of the bioluminescent wakes. However, the path to operational deployment was not without obstacles. Military bureaucracy, rooted in tradition and cautious of anything that defied established doctrine, initially resisted the widespread adoption of the flash trick. Senior naval officers, accustomed to radar and sonar, found it difficult to grasp the utility of a photographic technique that seemed to rely on disturbed plankton. "You're telling me we're going to hunt U-boats with microscopic glowing worms, Doctor," one admiral grumbled during a heated briefing. It took the intervention of a high-ranking admiral who was shown the irrefutable photographic evidence and had the foresight to understand its potential. He saw the stark photographs, the clear outlines of the S-44 and its glowing trail, and understood the paradigm shift. In August 1942, after weeks of intense lobbying and undeniable demonstration flights, authorization was finally granted for the operational deployment of the Egerton Flash units to squadrons patrolling the Atlantic. The invisible enemy was about to face a new, unseen threat. September 1942. The Bay of Biscay. The operational deployment of the Egerton Flash units began, bringing a new unsettling uncertainty to the nightly patrols. Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann, commander of U-552, remained unaware of this new Allied capability. His routine was well honed and effective. Every night, under the cloak of darkness, U-552 would surface to recharge its depleted batteries, ventilate the boat, and allow the crew a precious few moments of fresh air. It was a vulnerable period, but one made relatively safe by the darkness and the speed with which they could crash dive. Tonight, however, was different. Lieutenant Commander Jim Reedy, flying his PBY Catalina, felt a different kind of tension. His aircraft was now equipped with one of Egerton's flash units, a bulky but powerful contraption mounted beneath the fuselage. Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, despite his initial skepticism, now meticulously checked the cameras and flash system, his earlier resistance replaced by a grudging respect for the doc's ingenuity. Ensign Robert Chen, now a key member of the mission planning, had briefed them extensively on what to look for: the subtle variations in the wake patterns, the distinction between a U-boat and a whale. Hours passed in the monotonous drone of the engines, punctuated only by false contacts. The glint of waves, the shimmer of distant fog banks. The crew was tired, their eyes strained from staring into the black void. Then a low voice from the radar operator crackled over the intercom. "Possible surface contact, bearing 270, range 5 miles. Reedy's heart hammered. This could be it. He adjusted course, bringing the Catalina into a wide, sweeping arc. "Prepare flash," he ordered. Sullivan tensed, his finger hovering over the trigger. As the Catalina closed the distance, the faint radar blip resolved into a barely perceptible shape on the dark surface below. "Visual on surface vessel confirmed," shouted the co-pilot. Reedy knew the drill. The U-boat would have seen or heard them already. 30 seconds. He plunged the Catalina into a steep dive, aiming to get as close as possible before the inevitable crash dive. "Flash!" he commanded. A blinding white explosion of light erupted beneath the aircraft, momentarily turning night into an artificial day. It lasted an instant, But in that fraction of a second, the camera captured everything. Below, Hartmann, standing on the U-552's bridge, was momentarily dazed by the sudden, impossibly bright flash. It was like a lightning strike directly overhead, but utterly silent. Before his eyes could adjust, the light was gone, leaving him momentarily disoriented in the darkness. "Alarm, alarm, crash dive, Ziel!" he bellowed, his voice laced with an urgency his crew instantly recognized. The klaxons blared, and the U-552 began its rapid descent, the ocean rushing over the deck. Reedy immediately swung the Catalina around. "Another flash!" he yelled. The second burst of light revealed a ghostly, luminous trail in the water, stretching almost 200 yards from where the U-552 had just been on the surface. The bioluminescent wake, disturbed by the U-boat's hasty submergence, glowed eerily. "There it is!" Sullivan shouted, pointing. "Target the wake!" Reedy followed the glowing trail, dropping a string of depth charges precisely along its path. The explosions rocked the ocean, sending plumes of water high into the air. Below, the U-552 was buffeted violently. Lights flickered, gauges shattered, and men were thrown against bulkheads. Hartmann, gripping the periscope, felt a cold dread. They had been seen. But how? The flash, yes, but they had already been diving. It made no sense. Miraculously, the U-552 survived the attack, but it sustained damage to its hydroplanes and electrical systems. Hartmann ordered a painful retreat back to base. His report to U-boat command was unprecedented. Allied aircraft possess new unknown night detection capability. Observed blinding flash, followed by accurate depth charge attack on submerged position, suggest extreme caution during surface operations. The German High Command was baffled. How were the Allies seeing submerged submarines at night? Was it a new radar or some infrared device? The intelligence reports were inconclusive. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, though skeptical of the blinding flash explanation, could not ignore the sudden spike in near misses and damaged U-boats. He immediately ordered all U-boats to avoid surface operations in the Bay of Biscay whenever possible, forcing them to remain submerged longer. This seemingly minor tactical shift had a profound strategic impact, severely reducing the U-boat's operational range and endurance, weakening their stranglehold on the Atlantic. The hunter had become the hunted, thanks to a photographer's forbidden trick. From October 1942 through March 1943, the impact of the Egerton flash units reverberated across the Atlantic. What began as an experimental, forbidden technique rapidly became standard procedure. Squadrons across the Atlantic fleet were equipped with the new system. The statistics spoke for themselves. U-boat sightings by air patrols surged by an astonishing 300%, and successful attacks, either leading to sinkings or severe damage, increased by 150%. The morale of Allied aircrews soared, their skepticism replaced by a fierce, almost zealous enthusiasm for the flash units. Lieutenant Commander Jim Reedy, once the cynical pilot, now championed the system. "That milk drop, Professor," he'd grin. "He taught us how to see ghosts." Technical improvements were continuous. Egerton, still working tirelessly, refined the units, making them lighter, more robust, and further reducing their recycling time. New optical filters enhanced the visibility of even fainter bioluminescent trails. The cat-and-mouse game evolved. German U-boat commanders, after Hartmann's report and similar encounters, implemented countermeasures, deeper dives, altered patrol patterns, and even crude attempts to create decoy wakes by dropping oil or debris. But the Allied analysts, led by Ensign Robert Chen, quickly learned to distinguish these false signals. Chen's role expanded dramatically. He trained dozens of photo analysts to interpret the nuances of wake signatures, teaching them to differentiate a U-boat's distinct trail from those of whales, schools of fish, or thermal currents. His careful, methodical approach ensured the precious intelligence gleaned from the flashes was accurate and actionable. Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, who had initially resisted Egerton's innovations, underwent a profound transformation. The flash system, which he once mocked, had delivered results, and for Sullivan it was personal. His younger brother, a merchant mariner, had been lost on a convoy ship sunk by a U-boat in 1941. Now every successful detection, Every U-boat forced to dive felt like a small measure of retribution. He became an ardent advocate for photo reconnaissance innovation, pushing for better cameras, sharper lenses, and faster processing. He often flew with new crews, teaching them the subtle art of seeing the wake. In April 1943, Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann embarked on what would be his final patrol. U-552, despite its earlier damage and the constant threat, was still a formidable vessel. One night, while surfacing far from the usual shipping lanes, the familiar, blinding flash erupted above them. Hartmann, though startled, reacted with practiced speed. The U-boat crash-dived, and though Allied depth charges rained down, they were not as accurate this time. U-552, though shaken, evaded destruction. As they limped back to base, Hartmann reflected on how completely the technological landscape had shifted. The Allies now had an answer for every U-boat tactic. The advantage, once decisively German, had evaporated. The culmination of this shift came in May 1943. U-boat losses reached unsustainable levels, forcing Grand Admiral Dönitz to make the agonizing decision to withdraw his U-boat fleet from the North Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous campaign of the war, had reached its turning point. The flash had lit the way. The full impact of Egerton's forbidden flash photography was not widely known until after the war, shrouded in military secrecy. Harold Egerton, a man who saw wonder in the unseen, continued his pioneering work. His high-speed photography techniques revolutionized scientific imaging, leading to advancements in deep-sea photography, sonar development, and even capturing the terrifying beauty of nuclear tests. He helped map the ocean floor and contributed to numerous scientific fields, always pushing the boundaries of what could be observed. Lieutenant Commander Jim Reedy continued his naval career, retiring decades later as a respected captain, his early skepticism replaced by a profound belief in the power of ingenuity. Ensign Robert Chen, despite facing prejudice in the post-war era, persevered, eventually becoming a distinguished professor of optics and photo analysis, his keen insights forever changing how images were interpreted. Tragically, Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, the gruff but dedicated photographer, did not survive the war, killed in action in the Pacific Theater in 1944 while photographing beach landings. His personal drive to find submarines had been fulfilled, but his life was cut short. In the 1960s, a remarkable encounter took place at a technical conference. Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann, now a civilian, found himself in conversation with Harold Egerton. The former adversaries, a U-boat commander and the inventor whose device had hunted him, shared a moment of mutual respect. Hartmann, having heard Egerton's lecture, finally understood the blinding flash. He recounted his experiences, and Egerton listened intently, recognizing the human impact of his scientific endeavor. It was a testament to the unexpected connections forged by the crucible of war. The broader impact of strobe photography was immense. It transformed not just military reconnaissance, enabling night flights for intelligence gathering and missile tracking, but also forensic science, industrial analysis, and even crash investigation. The irony was profound. A tool designed to capture the delicate coronet of a milk drop or the intricate flutter of a hummingbird's wings, an instrument of beauty and scientific curiosity, had become a pivotal weapon that revealed the hidden threats of war. The Egerton system was credited with over 200 confirmed U-boat detections, a contribution that played a crucial role in the Allied victory in the Battle of the Atlantic. It was a powerful demonstration of how civilian innovation, coupled with military necessity, could utterly transform the course of history. The Atlantic, late 1943. A PBY Catalina soared through the night, its engines a familiar hum. But this time, confidence filled the cockpit. The flash, once seen as a dangerous, forbidden violation of tactical principles, had become the guiding light. It had illuminated the unseen enemy, turning the tide of a desperate war. Harold Egerton's singular obsession with freezing a moment in time had, in an unexpected twist of fate, helped to freeze the U-boat threat in the Atlantic, forever altering the canvas of naval warfare. If you enjoyed this untold story of wartime innovation and the extraordinary individuals who shaped it, Please consider subscribing for more compelling historical narratives and leave a comment below with your thoughts.